It is my pleasure to have Dr. Mike Beatty, my colleague and immediate past program director of the podiatry residency program at Roger Williams Medical Center in Providence, Rhode Island. But Dr. Beatty has you have so many different faces. You are also artist, a writer. And why won't you, for this initiative I'm doing for wellness awareness for healthcare workers, we are reading poetry. Please tell us what poem you're going to share with us.
Well, this poem is from probably my favorite poet, Emily Dickinson. Emily, as most people know, was kind of a recluse in the 1800s, and she wrote approximately 1,800 poems, and at an incredible rate, sometimes one a day. But her poems just really show so much intelligence, but so much, irony, and there's a lot of close reading of her poems. It's more than just a sentiment. There's really almost like a story in each of the poems, and most of the poems are 3 or 4 stanzas and not long. So I mean, you could read one a day, and I just like them. They're very witty. So the poem that I was going to read for today is called "Because I Could Not Stop for Death," and I can read it now if that's good.
Sure.
Sure. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of grazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews grew quivering and chill. For only gossamer my gown, my tipper only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was barely visible, the cornice in the ground. Since then, in centuries, and yet feels shorter than the day, I first surmised the horses' heads were towards eternity. So this poem is obviously about someone dying or being approached by death and not wanting to die, but death comes and picks he or she up, and the individual assumes that they're in the carriage with death, but with immortality. But by the end of the poem, the individual realizes it's not immortality, it's eternity. Mm-hmm. And passing through some of the stages of life with children in the play yard, schoolyard, or wherever. And it's a poem like many of our poems where I think you can keep reading and reading the same poem over again. And I also enjoy poetry critics. Mm-hmm. I think 2 of the best, and I have some of their books, are Harold Bloom out of Yale, and a Harvard professor, Helen Vendler, Vendler. Helen has written on Shakespeare and Dickinson, and with the Shakespeare, she's written about his sonnets and really dissects each one, and all the hidden meanings and wordplay that go on is just incredible. The choices of words. So I wouldn't say that I'm a real devout reader of poems, but compared to some people perhaps, and I've never really tried to write a poem, but I just think that poetry, and I wrote this in one of my teen parenting books, I just think that poetry is a nice counterpoint to the day that most of us engage in. As physicians, I know we've talked about burnout and stress and everything, and so much of medicine used to be patient care, and now it seems like it's almost overwhelmed by rules, regulations, protocols, computers, coding, saying the right thing in a patient note to validate for billing. And it's, I don't know what side of your brain you're using half the time, your right side or your left side. So I think that for some people, going to poems, every day, reading a poem or doing something like that can, help with that burnout.
I completely agree. And the reason, I'm talking and doing this series, We Reading Poetry, is just to see the humanity of the doctors and to bring awareness to the issue of well-being. It's been devastating to see that some colleagues who are extremely well trained and very talented, and they even considering leaving the profession, to which I'm sure they went into, with open eyes. But I think in moments like that, we need to recognize that there is also so much more to us. And only if we pay attention to that, we can really go back refreshed to our work. And you always, you are very balanced, always, when we had our meetings at journal clubs and what's not, he definitely has this very cool about it. And I can see that, I remember you had a conversation with me that I posted on the website before, that so many times you try to balance much more with going back to arts or writing the pieces, your column for the newspaper. Tell me a little bit about your book, your second book.
Oh, the second book, thanks. It was a continuation of the columns. Just the columns were written over, I think, 8 years. So it just came out neatly to put the first 4 years, some 100+ columns in the first volume, and the second volume was the second 4 years. I would say that a lot of it is very similar, but I found, and the reason I stopped doing it was, a lot of the columns were centered on the stages and events that go on in the lives of teenagers. And two of my teenagers were now in college, so to speak, at that point, and only one would be at home. And I thought it was kind of unfair to center so much potentially on one person. I mean, there were stories about society in general, a lot of that, and patients, but I just felt, sometimes it's just time to stop. But I'd say that most of the advice, a lot of it was just reminding us that we were raised a certain way, and we all seem to like the way our parents raised us, and feel that that was a time of building character and a little sacrifice, and people had manners, and it wasn't about you, it was about your neighbor. And nowadays, it seems that there's a lot of emphasis on me, and what do I want, and what do I like, and what do I get. And so the columns are all tried to be written with a sense of humor, but that was the underlying theme.
And Mike, remind again the title of the first one, and where can we get it? I know it's on probably, you can buy it on online stores.
Yeah, the best place, it might be coming down to the only place. Some bookstores have gone out of business. Barrington Books only has a few copies, and I don't know that they're going to continue with it. It was on Books on a Square. I don't know if it's still there. But Amazon has it. It's the Parent Trap Columns, volumes 1 and 2, and it's definitely available, in book form and in Kindle on Amazon.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic, and I think that this is a nice roundup of showing you so many faces, which is awesome. And we can all do it and have a very fruitful careers as physicians, but also something more. And I hope that people recognize that, and that we will continue to inspire the younger generation to stay in healthcare.
Well, they might because of efforts like yours and doing this and seeing how someone can be successful and still do this and try to help those generations coming after them. So I think they will because of you.
Yeah, I hope. Well, I think it's truly a common effort, togetherness. It brings, you know, the idea that you can do it alone, but we are a community, and I always felt part of it whenever I exchange various, you know, patient stories or trainee stories with you. So thank you so much for spending
Thank you.
this few minutes of your weekend with me, and have a nice day.
Thanks, you too.